Most people can handle a high price. What they hate is a moving price. That is the strange part about hidden fees. A product can look affordable at first, rise later, and create more anger than a product that was simply expensive from the start. Think about airline checkout, ticketing platforms, hotel bookings, food delivery apps, and e-commerce carts where the total suddenly grows after you have already spent time choosing. The math may look small, $5 here, $12 there. A service charge, a convenience fee, a platform fee, a cleaning fee, a handling fee. But emotionally, it does not land like a neutral addition. It lands like the deal changed in the middle. And that is the real story. Hidden fees are not only about money. They are about timing, expectation, and the feeling that someone waited until you were committed before showing the full truth. That is why they feel personal. That is why they feel sneaky. And that is why they often create more outrage than a higher all-in price that was visible from the beginning. A high price says, this is what it costs. A hidden fee says, that was not the whole story. Those are psychologically different messages. When the price is clear up front, people can reject it, accept it, compare it, or walk away. Their sense of control stays intact. But when the real total appears late, the buyer has already invested attention, time, and maybe even identity. They picked the flight, chose the seats, filled the cart, imagined the meal, started the booking, mentally crossed the line toward yes. That means the fee does not arrive in a neutral moment. It arrives after commitment has already started. And once commitment begins, a late cost feels less like information and more like a trap door. This is why hidden fees trigger stronger language than normal prices. People do not only say it is expensive. They say it is ridiculous, shady, greedy, deceptive. The emotional vocabulary changes because the buyer is reacting to the feeling of being cornered, not just to the number itself. Hidden fees feel worse because pricing is never judged as pure arithmetic. It is judged as a process. Buyers ask silent questions every time they pay. Was this clear? Was this honest? Did the seller respect my ability to make a clean choice? Did the page or the platform tell me the truth early enough for it to matter? That is why a $12 fee can create more anger than a $30 higher sticker price. The smaller number may still feel worse if it arrives in a way that violates fairness expectations. People are not only evaluating outcome, they are evaluating procedure. This is easy to miss from the business side because dashboards mostly measure conversion, abandonment, and average order value. But the buyer is experiencing something else. The buyer is asking whether the commercial relationship still feels legitimate. Once that legitimacy cracks, the fee starts radiating beyond itself. Now the whole brand feels slippery. Now every other number on the screen feels less trustworthy. Now the seller seems to be winning through concealment rather than value. Once you start looking for the pattern, it appears everywhere. In travel, it shows up as service charges, baggage fees, resort fees, seat fees, and booking fees. In food delivery, it appears as platform fees, small order fees, delivery fees, and service charges layered on top of one another. In e-commerce, it can hide in shipping, taxes, protection plans, handling fees, or last-step add-ons that quietly alter the total. In hospitality, it often appears on the bill as charges that were technically disclosed somewhere, but not disclosed when they actually mattered. That is why hidden fees survive. They are not tied to one category. They are a structural tactic that works in any environment where the seller can stage the cost over time. And that staging matters, because the first number attracts. The later number extracts. The first number gets the click. The later number tests how much friction the buyer will tolerate now that they are partway through the process. The timing of the fee is not an accident. It is the tactic. If the full price shows up at the beginning, the buyer can compare calmly. If it shows up near the end, the buyer is now facing a different equation. Not just what does this cost, but do I really want to start over? This is the commitment window. The moment when the user has already searched, filtered, typed, selected, and imagined ownership. At that point, the exit cost is no longer zero. Leaving means wasting effort. Repeating the process somewhere else means more uncertainty, more time, and more annoyance. So the fee lands after the platform has already increased the psychological price of walking away. The total becomes harder to reject because the buyer is no longer comparing simple prices. The buyer is comparing a bad feeling now versus the hassle of resetting the whole search. That is what makes hidden fees sticky. They are often too late to be clean and too small to force an automatic quit. So they live inside that uncomfortable zone where people resent them and still pay. Another reason hidden fees feel harsher is that people usually shop with mental buckets, not perfect spreadsheets. They have a rough travel budget, a rough dinner budget, a rough shopping budget, a rough sense of what feels normal for this type of purchase. The first visible price helps them place the item inside that bucket. But when the later fees appear, the purchase starts drifting out of the category where it originally felt acceptable. A delivery order that looked like a quick convenience purchase starts feeling like a premium indulgence. A hotel booking that felt competitive suddenly feels padded. A ticket that fit the plan now feels like a bad deal. That drift matters because buyers are not only protecting cash. They are protecting the story they are telling themselves about the spend. If the final number forces the purchase into a more expensive identity than the one they agreed to, resentment rises fast. The fee did not only add cost. It changed what kind of purchase this now feels like. Hidden fees do more than reduce satisfaction on one order. They quietly tax trust. Once a buyer feels manipulated by the final total, they start questioning the whole pricing environment. Was the headline price bait? Were the savings claims real? Were the recommendations honest? Was the highlighted plan actually the best value, or just the one that looked best before the extras landed? This is why late fees can damage brand perception far beyond their dollar value. The platform may still win the order, but it loses emotional credit. The next visit begins from a colder place. The buyer arrives more guarded, more skeptical, more likely to compare elsewhere, more likely to read fine print, more likely to assume the next total will also expand. In other words, the fee can convert today while weakening tomorrow. That tension matters. Because some tactics optimize the transaction while degrading the relationship. Hidden fees often live in exactly that zone. If buyers hate hidden fees so much, why do businesses keep using them? Because the tactic often works just enough. The lower headline price improves ranking, improves click-through, improves comparison performance, and increases the number of buyers who enter the funnel. Once the buyer is inside, some will still complete even after the total rises. Others will complain, but many will not leave. From a narrow optimization view, that can still look profitable. The system rewards attraction first. And in categories where platforms compete on visible price comparison, the incentive to suppress the all-in total upfront can be strong. There is also an operational reason. Many companies do not think of the extra charges as deception. They think of them as separate components owned by separate teams, taxes, suppliers, marketplaces, logistics, or finance rules. But the buyer does not experience internal org charts. The buyer experiences one total. And that gap between operational logic and lived experience is where the tactic stays alive. Hidden fees are not unbeatable. In many cases, transparent pricing wins in the long run because it feels cleaner, calmer, and easier to defend. When the total is visible early, buyers can compare honestly. The brand may look slightly more expensive at first glance, but it often feels more confident, more adult, more respectful. That matters in categories where repeat behavior, trust, and reputation drive the business more than one extra marginal conversion. There is also a premium effect here. Clear pricing can signal seriousness. It suggests the seller is not trying to pull the customer forward through partial information. It suggests the number is sturdy enough to be shown in full. That does not mean transparency always wins in short-term click contests, but it often wins in trust, lower outrage, lower friction, and a better emotional aftertaste. And that aftertaste shapes whether buyers come back with suspicion or with ease. Once you see hidden fees clearly, the lesson is bigger than one annoying charge. It tells you how buyers actually interpret prices in the wild. They do not react only to amount. They react to order, timing, clarity, and the feeling of whether the seller respected their decision process. A price can be high and still feel clean. A fee can be small and still feel offensive. Because buying is not just arithmetic. It is also dignity, control, and trust. So the next time a total rises late, do not ask only whether the fee is technically disclosed. Ask what moment it was disclosed in. Ask whether the first number was doing recruiting work, while the later number did extraction work. Ask whether the design was helping you decide, or helping you drift too far to restart. That is the more useful lens. Hidden fees feel worse than high prices because they change the terms after commitment begins. They do not just charge more. They make the buyer feel that the truth arrived late. And late truth is one of the most expensive feelings in commerce.